Hello and a very warm welcome to the 42 Rugby Weekly. Gavan Casey with you here. Wins for all of the Irish provinces in the United Rugby Championship over the weekend. Leinster, the champions, narrowly avoiding becoming the first province in 4 years to lose to the very spirited Dragons. A job well done by Ulster, who went ham in Parma. Jesus Christ, who wrote this? Munster weathered some early bluster at home to the very entertaining Stormers. And after having the red rag waved tauntingly in front of them, Connacht earned a routine victory, swatting aside the rugby arm of a little-known South African telecommunications company. And joining us to chat about it all and look ahead to this weekend's action as well, Murray Kinsella, how are you?
I'm good. Your intros are getting more Alan Partridge-esque by the week, Gav.
That sounds terrible, thank you. And Bernard Jackman, how are you, sir?
Chapeau. No, very good, Gav. I love it. Yeah, creative. Back to your creative best. All good. Quite weak. No PSG. No harassing. So I'm just a bit of a come down. But looking forward to the weekend.
Yeah, should be a good one. We'll chat about it all. Murray, what about that ragtag bunch of hand-me-down merchants out west on Friday? Did they ever stand a chance against Andy Friend's Connacht?
Yeah, for a bunch of Leinster rejects, Connacht have really impressed us there, haven't they? It was just weird comments to make before a match. Just don't do it, Jake. I think Bernard's going to give us some insight into what he's like as a character, as a coach, but they were baffling comments to me, and it was great with that in mind to see how well Connacht performed after a rocky start, and things didn't look great. They were excellent after that early Bulls try, and they physically dominated them and they outsmarted them, and they had a better game plan. They looked better coached, they looked better conditioned, and it was really comprehensive in the end. So that's absolutely one that's even more satisfying for them in the light of the Jake White comments.
Birch, people will be aware of the comments at this point. It's Thursday, but I'd love to get your interpretation of it as somebody who's come across White in a professional environment, but also as somebody who has coached at this level. I have no idea what he was trying to achieve by attempting to wind up the opposition, particularly when you're going to Galway. Like, that seems like a rookie error. It felt like maybe the comments were actually aimed more towards the other South African franchises and taking the piss out of them a little bit, and maybe he didn't realise that he was stirring the pot so much with Connacht. I don't know.
No, look at Jake. Jake's very funny, but he doesn't intend to be. It's just his ego. His ego is absolutely classic. I mean, anyone who speaks about who refers to himself in the third person a lot, you know they've got a high opinion of themselves. But I met him first in Marcoussis, where we were going through a screening process to get on the French pro license, and effectively to get your pro license in France, you need a badge or an armband to be able to go on the sideline, which is a huge thing in France. But also the club gets a grant back for every licensee they have in the club. So Jake had just arrived in Montpellier, and Altrad sent him to Marcoussis to try and get on this course. And it's basically 12 weeks over the course of the year, Monday to Thursday. And anyway, the morning is a one-on-one interview to test your motivation. 2, you present your philosophy around coaching, game strategy, and the other part was a analysis of a piece of footage, how you would actually rectify and change your training week. And Jake didn't have a word of French. He didn't bring a translator with him. And while the club scene in France is a mix of English and French, you can definitely get away without any French at the start. In the French Federation, it's hardcore. You either speak French or you don't get listened to. And I just said to Jake at lunch, having had the morning doing all these different tests, and I couldn't imagine how his interview went, because he said to me that basically it was over after 2 minutes because the guy refused to speak English. And so we're sitting down in the food hall. There's 100 coaches there. There's 25 places, and I was just trying to make conversation, to be honest. And I just said, "Oh, Jake, do you think he'll get on the course?" And I wasn't his coaching ability; it was his lack of French was my point. And he put his hand on my knee and he goes, Bernard, my son, look around. And he does this, look around. So we look back, and there's 98 other coaches, or 97 other or 98 other coaches there. And he goes, how many of these Oaks have won a World Cup? Right? and I went, none. And he goes, Bernard, I'll be on the course. So I got great satisfaction. On Monday when I got the email and looked down through the 25 and there was no Jake White. So that's just the way he is. And it wouldn't have bothered him. He would have forgot about it. But I find it very interesting. He usually has this attitude of, if I coach a team, we can beat anybody, right? And that's the way he is. And it's basically no one smarter than Jake. And it was really weird. The month going into Leinster, he was talking Leinster up as if they were unbeatable. It was the greatest team of all time, which is very unlike him. And obviously, his team played a little bit like that. They stood off them. They were a little bit overawed. And then a week after, he goes completely the other way, and he's just totally disrespectful to Connacht. And I knew this was going to happen because I got word on Thursday that the Bulls were referring to Galway as being like Kimberley, right? So Kimberley is a mining town in South Africa. No disrespect to anyone from Kimberley, but like it's a bleak enough place to go. And they stayed on the outskirts of Galway, and they did their captain's run in the sports ground. But I don't think they actually ever went in further into Galway. So, their impression was, we're in this, outpoint in the middle of nowhere. The pitches, stadium, they like the fairness in South Africa, the stadiums are top class. So, the Loftus is phenomenal. They played in the Viva the week before. But I think he completely lost the plot. And, that message subliminally goes into the players' heads as well. And Connacht didn't give him bar that first try. Connacht didn't make it comfortable for them in any way. And it was a brilliant performance.
Yeah, it certainly was. Ultimately, Connacht battered them, Murray, and what was probably most impressive about it was early doors, even aside from the Bulls' try, it felt like they were losing some of the physical collisions. You kind of felt a little bit concerned for them if the game continued in this trajectory or in this pattern that things might get ugly. And they really just turned it on its head, and they became the unstoppable force in that game, sort of sent the Bulls home packing, really, and with their tails between their legs.
Yeah, they bullied them really in the course of the 75 or 70 minutes after that rocky start. And you look at the maul even, their first try, the Connacht maul comes 10 metres forward, batters through the Bulls' defence and leads to a lovely bit of interplay by the Connacht midfield who were so impressive. There was a brilliant bit of maul defence then in the kind of coming towards the 30-minute mark in the Connacht 22 where the Bulls are 10 metre out and they think this is a chance to swing momentum, and they do really well to stop them. They had some excellent defensive sets in their own 22 again, Connacht, and they just battered people in the tackle. Finlay Bealham was leading the way. I thought he was so physical. You had the likes of Cian Prendergast, Jordan Duggan, younger guys stepping up in that regard and bullying guys who have a bigger CV and a longer experience in the game. So that was wonderful for Connacht to see, because that's often a question around them in those bigger games, but it was really aggressive and physical and relentless. One of those words that they've identified as a key theme for them this season. Like, you love to see how they just did not take the foot off the throat. Right at the end, the rain's absolutely, I was going to say coming down, but coming sideways in across the pitch, and you think they could just put the feet up here for the last few minutes, but they go and score another try and just hammer it home. So I suppose for Jake White, it's a kind of Jamie Vardy thing. If you're going to chat shit, like that's what can happen. You got to back it up on the pitch, and they absolutely didn't. And it is fascinating to see how he and his team are treating this. Even after the Leinster match, he's talking about salary caps and those kind of concerns. I mean, he has a squad full of good players there, and they haven't been up to scratch yet. Obviously, really early days, really challenging, coming on tour after playing a Currie Cup campaign and plenty of rugby before that as well. It's been a really weird year for South African rugby, but they haven't turned up as yet, and he needs to kind of look closer to home to get his stuff sorted.
Just on that, Murray, I think the South Africans will get better, but I think we need to appreciate and understand how hard touring is if you don't have the financial. It's not about salaries; it's about the capacity to do things that are interesting during the week. And you've toured with Irish teams and Lions tours, etc. It's breaking up that monotony, and that's what I worry about the South Africans. Are they able to go and play golf on a Wednesday, or are they able to get out and about and just have a meal somewhere else, or do the Guinness, tour, or whatever it is? Giants Causeway. It's like, in fairness to me, the Bulls look mentally fatigued, etc. And in fairness to the Stormers, John Dobson is the complete opposite of Jake White, in that it's all about the environment and making a happy camp. And I'm having a few pints with him tonight, so I'll learn a bit more about that. But it's just getting that balance right, and particularly for them, because obviously it's so expensive here compared to when they're spending the rand. But also now they're going to, it's a 4-week tour, and now there's a very strong chance that their home games are going to be in Italy. So I wouldn't worry about the quality of the South Africans or the physicality or the match sharpness. I would worry about how hard it's going to be for them being away for such a long period, and maybe not being able to enjoy touring as much as as the Northern Hemisphere teams when they go down to South Africa and you're doing the safari and you're doing Vic Falls or whatever you're doing. That's just something that maybe we don't appreciate, and it could certainly be something that could, I suppose, lessen their chance of being as competitive as they probably should be.
They need more nights out. The Stormers were out in Dublin last night. I interviewed your man Evan Roos, the really impressive number 8. I was chatting to him last night and he was bursting to get off the phone because the rest of the lads were waiting for him to go in for a pint in Dublin. So a bit of culture as well is key.
Bert, how did Connacht actually win that game to your mind? Because on Monday, Murray and Owen had a great chat about, say, ball and play time. And obviously you could see, even with the untrained eye, that the tempo at which they were playing became sort of unsustainable from the Bulls' point of view and very difficult to defend against. But like when you're coming away from watching that game, particularly given the start, how did they turn it and how did they turn the screw ultimately?
Yeah, I thought the ball and play time in the first half, paid off in the second half. So there was one example where it was a really long phase, and you probably talked about this, Murray, but it was this disallowed try down the right-hand side where the Bulls, didn't get touch on an exit. And Connacht did a little 1-2 down the right hand side. Now got blown back for a forward pass, but I mean the lack or the weakness of the Bulls' kick chase in that moment was like, wow, they're really struggling when the ball is in play for more than 2.5 minutes or whatever, and back to back. So I thought Connacht kept the ball on the field pretty well. Their variation in terms of their line out attack. They went through the Bulls rather than around them, which everyone thinks, we're playing a big pack here. We need to play wide. But they actually were really direct, and they went into that seam at the back of the line out over and over again. They only tried a maul once, and that maul led to the Tierno Halloran try because they conserved their energy and then they went after the Bulls, and it was a very good technically built maul that got away down the open side, and they sheared off, and that led to the tightness in the Bulls' defence. And then the second half, again, they just went up the middle, pick and goes, before they went wider. So I thought tactically, and that's something, Murray's spoken about in his piece about, Andy Friend wants to be fast, relentless and adaptable. And when they reviewed Cardiff, they felt there was times when they didn't show that adaptability. And I thought they adapted really well against the Bulls. They still had high ball and play time, so they were played fast, but they were more direct than they normally are. And in fairness, that's something that's around the Bulls' defence as well. There is a lot of holes around the ruck, and there was against Leinster as well. So they spotted that and they exploited it, and it was to get the bonus point win. And, there was a lot of question marks, new coaching staff. To lose that game would have been massive for them. And I just think it'll settle everyone down. It'll get the players to really believe in what they've been trying to do. Because they've had a tough pre-season, 2 heavy defeats in the friendlies. I think it's an absolute massive result for Connacht. I still worry about their ability, over the course of the season in terms of squad depth, etc. But that was a really good start for them at home.
Yeah, we've spoken in the past, Murray, I suppose, about that need for consistency, which even as a piece of phraseology can be a bugbear for a lot of people. But ultimately with Connacht, it's literally true. You just want to see them back that now with a similar type of performance, similar victory, and put together a string of them really without interruption. Is that possible for them? Is it sustainable, that type of performance that they produced on Friday night?
Yeah, I think so. And if they can avoid injuries is a big part of that. You saw Leva Fafita come off the bench and add a huge amount, really across the board. He's a big unit, obviously powerful, but good line-out skills. He's well able to handle an offload as well. And if you can have a bit of competition for places, it adds massively to that effort. Really good chance to roll on now against Dragons on Saturday. They're at home again. It'll be really nice for them to get that bit of momentum early in the season. And then importantly, just to, I suppose, for the coaches have to keep pressure on players to back that up individually, because there's so many good, and it was a really collective, cohesive performance, but so many of the individuals within that played really outstandingly well. We've mentioned a couple of them. Obviously, Mac Hanson had his big moment and really impressed with his score. You had Tom Farrell, I thought, just reminding everyone of how classy a rugby player he is. He had a bit of an injury nightmare obviously last season, but he was so integral to all things. He finished his try really well, showed his pace. He had that offload before the Tierno Halloran try, some lovely straightening lines. One instance where he kind of feeds Tom Daly on his shoulder, just straightening up and popping it off to his right hand side. Really well involved and running excellent lines whenever they had set piece plays, as well as a bit of physicality and some good reads in defence. So I mean, he's a bit of a game changer for them when he's fully fit, such a creative presence. So guys like that being at that level every week makes it much easier as well. So yeah, fingers crossed for him on the injury front, because when the squad is a relatively small squad, but when everyone is fit, it's a really nice balanced squad.
Yeah, Birch, justice for Mac the Knife Hanson, made butter of the Bulls defence. And I think when he signed, not a direct quote from you, but you said something along the lines of he's an absolutely woeful rugby player, but were you impressed by him on Friday?
No, I thought he was good against Cardiff. Look, unfortunately, that's the market that Andy Friend operates in, where he has to try and find those rough diamonds. And in fairness to him, he's done it again. Like Papali'i was a cheap buy. You had to wait for him. You have discipline issues, but you saw him that first half. I thought he was exceptional. So Andy Friend is very, very shrewd in the market, but it's a gamble. And in fairness to Mac Hansen, against Cardiff in a losing team, I thought he was really impressive. And then he had that moment of brilliance against the Bulls, and he looks really good. And he could be a key man for them. In fairness, again, I have to say, I mean, if you're Jake White, you're going like it's rugby 101 when you put up a box kick, that there's pressure in behind. So Hansen did brilliantly, but if you're from a Bulls point of view, that's too soft. But let's applaud the brilliant finish from Hansen. And as I said again, I think he started incredibly well, and that's if he can prove to be a double the price he's cost type of player, well then that's brilliant for Connacht.
And just on the coaching side of it, Gav, like as Bernard mentioned, a new team settling in, and a great day for them. Defensively, obviously, Con Tucker going to be so happy with that. We're repelling repeated Bulls attacks and dominating them physically. And then from the attack, we saw loads of really nice ideas. Peter Wilkins has really got his hands on that now, and having switched over from defence is leading that. They scored off set piece, obviously. They had another number of breaks, even some of those clever little maul breaks. I know you shared a video, Birch, of some of them, and simple options, well executed, everyone in the right place, running genuine lines even if they're not getting the ball, and they executed that really well. So himself and Mossy Lawler helping out in that regard are going to be really pleased, and fingers crossed that they can continue in that vein, because it was really accurate and really sharp and really energetic.
Certainly was. Put some respect on Connacht's name. Birch, over in your old stomping ground, your old province or your old team had a difficult enough old day. Is it a blip for Leinster that they perform that way, or is it an actual genuine concern?
I think it's a blip, to be honest. I'd imagine they'll bounce back. The last performance like that for me was when they beat Zebra away 3-0 about 2 years ago. I was over there. There was a load of intent. They started fast. They were in the right part of the field. The conditions were really bad. I mean, it was a monsoon that morning. It was actually harder to play with the ball in hand. And in fairness to the Dragons, they effectively just parked the bus and just tried to play territory. Didn't really overplay. I thought Sam Davies and Josh Lewis managed the territorial battle pretty well. And Leinster looked like they were going to pull away. I mean, they just didn't score. Obviously, you got the Max Deegan try, but they had a couple of chances, very good chances in the Dragons 22, particularly when the Dragons were down to 13. Ross Byrne kicked one dead. Conor Bryan got stripped a couple of times. James Gibson Park knocked it on the back of the ruck. And as they made those mistakes, they just seemed to get really flustered, which is totally unlike them. And it became contagious. And then you had guys coming off the bench and missing their cue at line-out time. Ryan Baird, knocked on 3 or 4 balls, gave away a penalty. But if I would take the opposite. A lot of people were quite critical of Ryan Baird. I was actually impressed by, no matter how badly things were going, he was offering himself up. He kept coming looking for short lines off Nick McCarthy when other players would just stay a little bit deeper, catch it in their own time, but they're not going to do any damage. So I would see, okay, he's got to fix it, but I would see a lot I liked about his hunger to keep going at Dragons, even though he was obviously having a bad day. And it was just got caught in a complete rut. And then at the end, they were kind of hanging on. I mean, the Dragons get a penalty 50 yards out. Sam Davies kicks it and they lose. So I think they got onto the bus relieved. I think the review on Tuesday would have been pretty damning, and I would expect a backlash, and I wouldn't expect Leinster to dip as much. Now, credit to Dragons, as I said, they played a smart tactical game. They put a lot of pressure on the ball carrier, particularly as he fell, went for those strip a few times. They had a rush defence. I thought Leinster would be disappointed. Ross Byrne got spooked a bit by that outside pressure, and they kept playing back inside passes or running back in, so they got very narrow. And I thought it was definitely, and it wasn't. Look at the way it worked out with the rain, the way the game went. I think if you have a 5-3 bench split, you can get Frawley on early as a 12, and you then have that player to get around that rush. And because they only had Nick and Kieran Frawley as the back subs, Rory O'Loughlin got a headbang, I think, around the 55th minute. So he went for his HIA. Frawley goes on the wing. It just took away that ability to change it up tactically, which I think I'd imagine Stewart would have wanted to do. But that's the gamble you take when you go 6-2. And in fairness, yeah, the Dragons have a very good pack, very good back five, with full international, back row and second rows now, and they're not going to be a pushover for anybody. They probably just need to get a little bit more creative themselves,
Murray, just to talk about some of those errors, I feel like we have inquisitions into anything resembling a performance like this by Leinster because they hold themselves to such a high standard, and therefore we hold them to that same standard. But when you look at the actual lineup or the match day 23 and how experimental it is, or almost developmental it is in certain positions, and you have a number of guys who are putting their hand up for the season, really, and some guys who might not see a great deal of game time over the course of the season, the errors are bound to almost compound upon each other, aren't they? I guess I'm trying to be forgiving in the sense that guys are actually desperate to impress, and sometimes when you have too many guys like that on a pitch, not everything is well oiled or particularly fluid.
And it's interesting how Leinster are viewing this, certainly publicly. Talking to Rob McBride this week, he spoke about how there are actually fewer opportunities now for squad players, for younger players, given the rejig of the URC and fewer international overlaps, that these opportunities are going to be fewer and fewer. It's even more pressurised in terms of taking them. So I think people will feel they've missed an opportunity here. However, an experience like this is sometimes as valuable as, or more valuable actually, than hammering a team 40-50-0, racking up a big score, as we saw and have seen quite a bit over the last number of years. The players have been exposed to a very different scenario where they're under pressure, probably didn't handle it well, and as you say, kind of compounded. And it totally was that case. 30 turnovers conceded is just unheard of with Leinster, and the lack of conversion in the 22, unheard of as well. They had 16 entries and obviously just one score. They're so clinical, usually we're waxing lyrical about it, and this was the exact opposite. I agree with Bernard. I think it is a blip, but it'll be interesting to hear, or we probably won't hear the complete honesty around their view of their approach, of their mindset going into it, whether it was complacency, whether they didn't respect the opposition enough or the conditions enough, or the tactical approach, as Bernard says, of the line speed in their defence and managing that and putting doubt in their mind with a kicking game, which they did well against the Bulls, I thought. So there's a range there of really valuable learning experiences. It may have seemed like a dire day and something that sets people's careers back, but or makes it count against them in terms of selection. But I actually think they got more out of this than they would have racking up a 35-40-0 kind of scoreline.
Yeah, I just a lot of people say, no, those players will never play again. That's nonsense. I mean, they will. And the reality is that Leinster's training environment is so competitive that they can show form at that on a Stew Tuesday or whatever. So I agree, Murray. I think it wasn't pretty, but they got the win. And definitely there'll be elements to that they've learned a huge amount from. And that's been the big criticism we've had of the Pro 14 in the past, was that Leinster, Munster, Ulster only get tested against each other or, in a European crunch game. Whereas even though, the Dragons aren't Toulouse or Saracens, there's still a lot to be got from actually, getting exposed in certain areas and being able to go out and fix them.
What have you made of the Welsh region's input to the competition so far, Bernard? Scarlets seemed to enjoy themselves at the weekend. Obviously, Dragons did pretty well against Leinster, and then you had Ospreys and Cardiff playing against each other. It's been an ongoing concern for people outside of Wales, I guess, this sense that we get from our Welsh friends, be it in the media or just rugby fans on social media and so on, that they really just couldn't give a shit about any iteration of this competition. They want to cozy up with their neighbours in England and do something new. And yet they are a really important part of this if it is going to be a success, the URC. So just 2 weekends in, could I get your impression of, I guess, how they've performed and how it feels to you?
I think this league is much better, and it's much better not just because of South Africans, because we're still waiting for them. It's better because the Welsh and the Scots and Benetton are back, competitive, looking hungry, looking together. And the 4 Welsh teams, for me, are very even. I mean, the Ospreys just beat the Dragons the week before in a Welsh derby. Ospreys beat Cardiff in a tight game, and the Scarlets look good. And you look at, they've actually benefited from COVID in terms of being able to build better squads, and that sounds a bit stupid, but my explanation of that is that the players took a 25% pay cut. All right, it wasn't a deferred payment; they've taken a 25% pay cut. But the Dragons' budgets haven't been reduced. Sorry, the 4 regions' budgets haven't been reduced by 25%. So effectively, that extra 25% has gone into being able to recruit or build better squad depth. So, I mean, that's probably one part of it, and then again, there's they've been able to bring back some guys from Wales. So the Dragons have been able to bring back Will Rowlands, the second row, and he's now paired up with Ben Carter, who came through the academy. The Ospreys are very well coached under Toby Booth, very well drilled forward wise, but now they've got Gareth Anscombe back, a world class 10. So that's added to the likes of Reece Webb, who they brought back from Toulon, two seasons ago. You have George North, you have Alan Wynne Jones, you have Justin Tipuric to come, to build a team around. And the Scarlets, in fairness, they went through a really rough patch for the last 2 years, but Duane is back. They have good players, both Welsh internationals and some foreign players. And, they play a great brand of rugby, and I think they'll be competitive. I don't think any of the Welsh regions will win it, but they're certainly, I think they're galvanised by this new qualification for Europe, the new structure of the competition. Know that, obviously, the Welsh derbies are going to be huge, but they need to try and pick up points away from home as well to be the best of the Welsh regions and try and get into the European Cup. So, I think the Welsh are in a decent place for sure, and I think that's probably something that the Dragons have improved a lot. The Dragons have a good squad now, and the others are. The budgets are nearly equal now. The Scarlets and Ospreys are a little bit ahead of Cardiff and Dragons, but it's not a 3 or 4 million difference. They're quite close. So, and you can see that when you look at the best 15 they can put out.
There are encouraging signs really across the competition early on, and it is very early days and things will settle as well. But the match I enjoyed most so far is Edinburgh Scarlets in round 1. I thought Edinburgh were absolutely excellent. Mike Blair's gone in as coach there, really clever attacking coach. I know they lost to Benetton in dramatic circumstances last weekend, but again, there was plenty of quality on show. And Glasgow, with Nigel Carolan in there as attack coach now, gave Ulster a real fright in round 1, and then they dismantled the Sharks really there at the weekend, and their squad is really regenerated. Even Sione Tuipulotu in the centre looks like a brilliant signing. Jack Dempsey rampaging last weekend. He's come in from Australia as well, so it would just be wonderful if those teams as well can be competitive. Benetton 2 from 2, rolling on from their Rainbow Cup success, and I think we'll probably talk about them a little bit later on, but that's what you want right across the board. This weekend, Sunday, is the most interesting fixture for me. Munster away to Scarlets. Obviously, Munster are going to want to win that one, and Munster fans are hoping for it, but you'd almost love to see Scarlets give them a real close contest. Dwayne Peel, again, we know him from working in Ulster and how smart he is. They have an Irish defence coach in Hugh Hogan who'll have a bit of insight, obviously, into Munster. So that's a really interesting kind of barometer for them early in the season.
Yeah, Scarlets did put it up to Munster early last season, didn't they? Took a Ben Healy penalty from, I don't know, I think he kicked it from Scotland basically, but that should be a good one. We'll chat about Munster while we're on the topic then, right? And first and foremost, Murray, they did well to actually win that game. And I say that even though probably all three of us, and I'd say nearly every Munster fan watching the game, suspected that they would win the game even when they were 15-0 down or so, I don't. Is that just because they're Munster? I'm not sure. Like, maybe there was just a sense of it was a slow start. They couldn't be this bad for the rest of the game. They're at Thomond Park and so on, and so it proved. So credit where it's due. Firstly, I just wanted to ask you about one of Johan van Graan's comments after the game, where he said, quite rightly, he's not going to turn his nose up at 4 forwards tries in the second half, and ultimately that is what won Munster the game. I suppose my concern would be that we sort of know how that movie ends, when you get to the business end of a season, if that is your only means of problem solving or turning a game, Munster haven't traditionally had enough in the last 10 years really, but certainly in recent years, to change the course of a game that isn't going their way against say more seasoned opposition at that stage of the season than the Stormers were on Saturday. So I want to give them credit for winning, if you know what I mean, but I'm asking you, like, is this sort of going roughly the same way as previous seasons? Because when push came to shove, they found their way of winning again, but just that we've seen it might not work in the deep end of a season.
Yeah, and that's the fascinating thing that we discussed in our season preview. We'll only learn really later in the season. For this game, how they adapted was absolutely the correct path, and they deserve credit for that. They started to kick longer. They went to that maul, which is such a brilliant weapon. They're close in finishing as well, and it helps when you have someone like RG Snyman coming off the bench and just swatting people aside for a score. But they adapted really well. I think the Peter O'Mahony try save was an unbelievably big moment in the game, because Stormers had so much momentum, and another score there does make it a really difficult scoreboard task. Whatever about the awareness that Munster were going to stop giving them so much incredibly cheap access. The Stormers, I thought, were a breath of fresh air just across the board. As Birch mentioned, John Dobson is a interesting character. He was really good even before the match, actually, just relaxed and understands about promoting the game and enjoying the experience as well. The players seem to really like working under him, and at a very happy camp, and some of the rugby they played obviously was outstanding. I love the moment where the three front rows linked up with offloads to tee up a try. That's what you want from your key three playmakers in the team, and it was brilliant to see. But yeah, Munster adapted well. I do agree though that it's the same old question, is whether they can evolve beyond that Munster, and the concern is that the Stormers brought a really high line speed defence, really high edge. Munster knew that was coming. It was exactly the same the weekend before against Benetton. It has been the same. Their defence coach, Norman Laker, he studied under Jackman and Murray basically, and tries to implement a lot of the same things. So you had a chance to study that, to plan for it, and we didn't really see Munster throw any good punches in that regard. They didn't really have a way over, around, inside it, and they reverted to strength. I definitely think it was the right thing to do in this game, but you want to see that development. And the weekend before, we saw them looking to play to width, but inaccurately. And obviously it was the start of the season. It was, rustiness was part of that. But that is a theme with Munster in terms of when they actually try to play to that width, they're not world class at it. So that's the progress that needs to happen. And a test like that against a high line speed defence was a little bit revealing in that regard.
Yeah, but they are, in fairness, Bernard, caught between a rock and a hard place there, as Murray suggests, because particularly this season, you can afford to lose even fewer games, really. And they were up against it early. They found the correct means of winning that game individually. I guess it's just that if you are to become a more complete team for the latter stages of either this competition or European competition, you need to start to wheel some of that stuff out in slightly more difficult games. Like, you can't just do it at home to the Dragons or Zebra or whatever. And in fairness, they haven't only done it when they were almost certain of victory. They did it in some slightly bigger games last season too, but they need to start doing it when push comes to shove, if it is going to be a strategy of theirs down the line. And recent history would suggest that it does need to be a part of their strategy, at least for those bigger games.
Yeah, I think it's a small sample, 2 games, but when I look just quickly in my mind about, Connacht have been very good from their set piece attack, right? So they scored 2 tries, one against Cardiff, one against the Bulls from that scrum play, but also, their line out attack has been quite creative. Leinster's, I remember a midfield scrum in the first half against Bulls where they gave an inside ball back to Luke McGrath. And Ulster have been really sharp in terms of their set piece attack. So Munster have had really good set piece ball, but haven't done anything with it. And I think they mightn't have to be the all singing, all dancing attacking team where they play from deep and go wide. I don't know if they're going to get to that level, but if they don't have a threat off their set piece, right? So against the best teams, you need to be able to get that soft shoulder, to get that half line break, to get you on the front foot, to force a penalty, right? So how did they get back into the Stormers? 20? How did they get into the Stormers 22? the Stormers, I thought, were quite harshly penalised at the breakdown, and that gave them entry points. And then when Munster got there, they were excellent. And I think Munster could be the best in Europe. In that pressure game, 5 yards out, line out maul, pick and goes. Right? Why? Because Gavin Coombs, and this is no disrespect, and it's probably blasphemy to say it, but I think Gavin Coombs is more effective than CJ Stander in that game. Right? He's a bigger, more destructive ball carrier. So, and then you've RG Snyman in the team, right? So all you need is that extra little bit of power that the opposition don't have, and be really well drilled. And effectively, even though the goal line 22 dropout is a new tactical law change, if you're patient, you'll actually will score, or you'll get a penalty if you get there, right? So they need to find a way of getting there more often, and I think that's the pressure on Larkham. If they need to show more creativity from their set piece, because they've got a good lineup, they've got a good scrum, and within the first 3 phases, they need to be getting on the front foot, and I haven't really seen enough of that. And I think if they got that right this year, plus understood that maul, that pick and go game is going to be part of their weaponry, I don't think they'll be far away. I honestly think with that pack, the best pack you put Munster, that you put out for Munster, and you use Delande and Farrell as target setters, and you explode on transition or poor kick, and with the likes of Earlsey and Zeebs, etc. Like, that's what the box do. The box scores some great tries, but generally it's off good defensive sets where the opposition have kicked poorly, and then they exploit it. So Munster do that. There's less risk than being a freeloading team, an offloading team, and in cup rugby, that often is the best way. So I'm actually not as negative as maybe I thought I could have been. When I look at how good that pack could be, and mainly around, well, they're very well drilled, right? So they're drilled, in fairness, by Roundtree. They have good cattle, but I just think Coombs and Snyman, could be the two of the biggest and most destructive ball carriers in Europe this year.
And on the attack side, like, literally all you're talking about is 1 or 2 strikes a game, 1 or 2 moments of cutting the defence. And the Boks are a really good example. Look at last weekend when there was that slight bit more variety. Like, there was one attacking passage where Lou Diaga goes out the back and Philly LaRue steps up as a bit of a playmaker, and they cut the All Blacks, and it just makes everything else more effective, because suddenly that's in your mind as well as potential threat. And that's all Munster will get in a big game. It's 1 or 2 chances where the likes of Leinster or whoever you're playing in a knockout tie have a momentary slip. That's all it is, and you've got to be really ruthless in taking it. Like, let's be fair here. Munster are definitely trending really positively in terms of the squad and the players they have. Casey and Coombs continuing to impress. Every time a young player gets a chance now, which is, in my eyes, more than before, they're really stepping up and taking it. And Snyman back, like, yeah, we've said it so many times, but he's just a ridiculously good rugby player. Everything he does is high quality, high energy. He's incredibly popular, and that has such an effect in just galvanising everyone. Like, the best foreign player signings have had that role. Everyone loves them. All the fans love them. Everyone wants to see them do well, and they can be a leader in that regard as well. So yeah, he's just brilliant. Even his kick chase is like, it's Eben Etzebeth, like, it's relentless. He's so athletic and mobile. You notice, you're kind of like, why isn't he defending around the fringes? And then you see he has the agility and footwork to actually defend in a 13 channel and recover really well. So it's incredibly exciting that he's back and fully fit and looking so happy to be back on the pitch.
Pretty exciting for the tournament as well if the Stormers are going to continue playing like that under your buddy Dobson Birch, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually don't know Dobson well. It's Dowie Snyman, the attack coach, but he's bringing a few of the coaches for and Norman is the defence coach is coming out as well. But I think it is great, and that, for me, they've been a team that I've enjoyed the most. Even when you look back at their game against the Benetton, there was an edge to them, there was an exuberance, and they have the athletes, and obviously they've got some good players to come back in. But yeah, I think that Dobson is the right guy for them, particularly on a tour. And there's a lot of stuff going on off the field in the Stormers, like chaos, absolute chaos. So having that manager or DOR or head coach who can just, I suppose, put an arm around this group and get them comfortable, happy. And look, they would have been happy with how the game ended, but I think they would have left home and Park home. We're not a million miles away, you know, and that's not bad in your first trip overseas.
It's certainly not. Ulster were overseas themselves. They had an impressive victory over Zebra. It was pretty much a routine win, Murray, but I don't know, they did what was asked of them ultimately. I feel compelled to ask firstly about young Doki. He just seems like he's got his head screwed on. We've spoken plenty in the past about Craig Casey, as he was just about emerging at Munster as an exciting future Irish nine, and Doke does seem to have similar traits in a lot of ways. Obviously a goal kicking string to his bow as well. And McCooney out now, he has this chance very early doors to really set out a stall in Ulster colours.
Yeah, absolutely. He I think he's a huge prospect for Ireland as well, to be honest. I think he's going to be in there sooner rather than later. He looks really like a starting nine within a couple of years to me. Honestly, I think he has that much potential and that much confidence and self-belief. Obviously, he's still learning loads. And even in this game, we saw that, you know, he snipes close to the Zebra try line early on and just gets a little bit isolated, gets turned over. He gets blocked down at one stage, obviously, on a kind of pass at the base of the scrum. And those little bits they'll round out and polish off are really important. But the influence in the second half, even the moment where he kicks down the left-hand side, we were talking about it on Monday on the members podcast, kicks down the left-hand side and makes a tackle to force Zebra over their try line. A combination of vision, technical skill, desire and a bit of physicality as well, because he is a tall and strong athlete as well. So he kind of has a complete package there, and by all accounts, like really stepping up and similar to Casey in that regard, kind of snapping at heels and not afraid to throw his weight around and boss people who are older, more experienced than him. So yeah, they've got a number of really promising young players. Others are a little bit further ahead. I thought James Hume was excellent again. Brilliant footwork. Ethan McElroy obviously took his tries really well. Stuart Moore had some nice moments, particularly in defence, which is a real part of the game that he's been working hard on. He had 2 strips in tackles in the first half alone. So yeah, great to see the young players that they've backed and who have earned their chances. Really, it's not even just a case now of throwing people in there, to use that expression. It's guys who've earned their spots and who are now putting a lot of pressure on more established members of the squad. So that's a really positive place to be in. Collectively, it wasn't the perfect performance by any means. Plenty of frustrations there, but some really nice moments. And Craig Gilroy had a couple of brilliant moments for the older lads as well, with his lovely assists for 2 of the tries. The second one in particular around the back was just beautiful. So yeah, happy day in general for Ulster.
It felt like that was it was almost a cloud hanging over Ulster for a while, Bernard, in the sense that there wasn't so much young talent emerging or being brought through to the senior team. And like, we probably spoke in similar terms about Munster as well for a couple of years, but it seems to have switched very suddenly, like the narrative almost, or the reality really, in that they actually have produced a significant number of players, all of whom seem really, really good. And it's almost like the atmosphere there seems better now, you know, probably just having that little bit more depth, that more confidence in themselves. They're 2 from 2 and ultimately they want to win this competition, like, so they're going about it the right way so far.
Yeah, and I'll be quite close to Kieran Campbell, who was the academy manager, and I know he felt that a lot of the criticism directed towards Ulster was harsh, but there was a period there where the academy wheel stopped turning. And if you look at, there was a lot of their forwards originally came from Leinster, but it does take a while. He said to me 3 or 4 years ago, he says, "Look, I promise, there's real talent here. We just need to wait for them to come through." And you know, they are coming through now, and mainly backs, to be honest. But Dave McCann is a homegrown back row who's got a lot to offer, and those front 5 forwards take longer. You know, they take longer to come through. So we're seeing, you know, Nathan Doak and James Hume and these guys. We're seeing them a little bit earlier because of their, because of their position. But they are really talented, and I think that's the big thing for Dan, is that he's probably weathered the storm a little bit in terms of those young players. They've been very competitive, but just in terms of getting over the line in big games and getting silverware. I think Leicester away in the Challenge Cup, that was an opportunity lost. Now, you know, the way Leicester have started the season, you know, we can see that's the form is decent there. Borthwick's done a great job, but I felt them going down to the Challenge Cup last year was a real opportunity to win silverware. They missed out on that, but the most important thing is that those young players look like they're going to become very much Champions Cup level players for Ulster. Some of them already are, and maybe internationals for Ireland, which that Ulster haven't had enough of those really to be able to go into competitions, confident they're going to win them. And I think there's certainly bright sparks there in terms of where Ulster are going with a lot of homegrown talents, particularly in the backs as well.
The best Ulster performance of the weekend was Duane Vermeulen. I need to swiftly roll back on questioning whether he has the durability on a 2-year contract. He was unreal for the Springboks, and it was a real reminder of his qualities at the top level. Not always involved in every aspect of the game, but when he picked his moments, he made such an impact on the game. Obviously, that key breakdown turnover at the end, he had an earlier one, some big carries to rampage over people, and just his security and calmness in the backfield as well was really calming for the Boks in an area they've been kind of exposed when he wasn't there. So he was a massive part of that, and it is exciting to think of him in amongst those young players and passing on his experience, particularly to those forwards. Like Dave McCann is going to learn so much from him. Good to see Callum Reid also getting a bit more exposure. He's another prospect in the front row, and you have Harry Sheridan in the academy now, so they'll be hopeful that Vermeulen is going to help that progress with the forward side of it as well, because they've got too much backs coming out of the academy now.
Birch, Benetton coming to Ravenhill this weekend, and thankfully it looks like it's going to be a serious test of Ulster's credentials, and I say thankfully in the sense that it's good for the credibility of the competition, and we just want to see it more competitive across the board. They're 2 from 2 themselves. Brilliant win opening weekend, good win again at the weekend just gone, and we know from 2 seasons ago or 3 seasons ago was it, when Benetton go on a bit of a run, like it adds so much to even casual fans' enjoyment of what was then the Pro 14, what's now the URC. So this kind of feels like a bit of a, I won't call it a marquee fixture, but a really tantalising fixture to look forward to for the weekend. How do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, it's massive, and you know what? They haven't ever feared coming to Ireland. They could have easily beaten Munster a couple of years ago in a key game. I've been to the RDS where they've been really competitive against Leinster. So even when they were going bad, and they had a blip obviously last year in particular in the regular season, they haven't feared coming to Ireland. And I think coming to Belfast this weekend, they'll thrive in that atmosphere, which is obviously Ravenhill. It's going to be red hot. They've had 2 good wins at home, but the crowd wouldn't be anything like it would be in Ravenhill. And I think it's just brilliant. I was worried. I didn't know how they were going to kick on from obviously winning the Rainbow Cup. They obviously had that easier draw to get into the final, and then they put in a great performance against the Bulls. But the key is that they start this season well, and they have started well. And I think a strong Benetton is great for the league. And there's only really Zebra now who look like they're not going to be competitive. I think the Lions at home, when they eventually get to play down there, will be difficult. So I don't see any easy touch bar Zebra in the competition, which is a huge improvement on where we were.
How do you foresee that one going this weekend, Murray? Ulster at home to Benetton. Like, it's a chance for one of them to really stake a claim early doors and let people know they're very serious about this.
I have to say I would be surprised if Ulster don't win at home, and they've had that strength in Kingspan. But Benetton are in a really nice place. Even if they don't win this fixture, I think they will be competitive. They've got a good, strong coaching team. Kieran Crowley's obviously gone, but Marco Bertolami, a bit of a legend of Italian rugby, is kind of leading that now. Paul Gustard is there, and I know things didn't go great in Harlequins for him, but there's no doubt that he's a really high quality coach who'll bring a lot to that environment and has been in some really high performing environments before. So he's been a good addition. And on top of that, like, if we're talking about Ulster's youngsters, we've got to talk about Benetton's, because some of their younger guys have been like the key performance. Obviously, Leonardo Marin, the 19-year-old out half, came off the bench and scored that winning drop goal last weekend, which was a brilliant moment. But the hooker Lucchesi's been an excellent. Favretto in the number 8 jersey, brilliant. Menoncello out wide as well. These are like, guys who've just turned 20 or are in the process of that, and they're stepping up now in the URC and playing really well against good teams. And that's really exciting for Benetton first and foremost, but also for Italy, because we'll end up talking about that again later in the season and where they are and whether they're going to get better. And yeah, this is after a blip in the kind of Pro 14 season last year where Benetton couldn't get on a decent run. this is back towards the trajectory they were on before that, which had been really encouraging and had looked like a genuine long-term sustainable development. And again, obviously early days, but building on the back of the Rainbow Cup, I think it's brilliant to see, brilliant for the competition, and hopefully a few more shocks and surprises in store from Benetton this season.
I know we sort of brushed over Connacht at home to the Dragons, Leinster at home to Zebra, and I'm just sort of moving towards predictions time, lads. 2 home wins, do you reckon?
Yeah, I think Connacht will back it up. They'll get such confidence, and Zebra are going to get an absolute backlash. I wouldn't like to be in the Zebra bus going into the game this weekend. I think it's going to be tough.
Mur?
I'm in total agreement. Not going to be a great day for Michael Bradley's lads, but they do play some exciting rugby as well, so hopefully it'll be highly watchable.
hopefully. Scarlets Munster has a little bit more of a 50-50 feel to it, in the sense that it's at Parky Scarlets. They are bringing a vein of form into the game, having enjoyed a good weekend themselves, enjoyed a good win last weekend themselves. How do you see that one going, Murray?
I think Munster are pip, but I do think that's going to be a real battle in the kind of up for grabs in those last few minutes. Maybe even Ben Healy to pop over a 80-metre penalty, because he's kicking it further and further every single game. That guy has an absolute cannon on him. So match winner from Ben Healy, I'll go for.
What do you reckon, Birch?
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be a great game. I think Scarlets will see opportunities in the Munster defence that the Stormers exploited, and they have the tools to attack them there. But I think Munster will finally put a squeeze on them, and I think Munster edge it.
You mentioned young Marin's drop goal for Benetton 2 weeks ago, Murray. What about young Fionn Higgins for Naas RFC from 378 yards, as far as I could tell? Like, I'm not good at judging distances, but he was a long ways out, and just unbelievable to see the AIL back. Listen, everybody involved in rugby in this country at grassroots level, and anyone with a passing interest in it who's a member of a club has been waiting for this, and it was a great weekend. We had that marquee fixture with Lansdowne pipping Cork Con. I need to bring you in though on Higgins' drop goal. I saw you tweeted it out.
Yeah,
it's some hit.
There was another 10-15 metres on it, wasn't there? Like, the connection was just so sweet. I don't know if he'll ever, maybe he's a specialist and we don't know about it, but that is the kind of lifetime connection. It's like the best golfers probably have a shot like that once in their life where they connect with it perfectly and it just flies and flies. Hopefully no one's car got smashed in the car park because it went that far. It was a brilliant bit of skill and a nice reminder of the skill that's on offer. And that's been really great to see the last couple of days. The number of brilliant clips of outstanding rugby that just showcase what is going on around the country every weekend, and there is real pride about it being back. I've had loads of messages and people sending me stuff and just reminding us of how brilliant it is that it's back, of how the rugby in a lot of the AL games is better than what you might see in that Leinster Dragons game, for example. It's a lot more enjoyable, a lot more attacking intent, and the weather was pretty decent in most places, so that helped a lot. And as you say, it's just wonderful for a whole community to be back up and running. Like, club rugby is just such a joy. It's always one of my regrets every season that because we report so much on professional rugby and there's such interest in it that you almost don't get a chance to go and be part of that. But some of my best experiences, and I'd say my best experiences really in rugby, have been being part of a club and coming through that and having your community, and it's great and positive that it's back and of high quality. We saw lots of provincially academy contracted players involved as well. They need to get their game time up, and obviously you don't want them taking game time from guys who've been training away and are slogging away, but that lifts the standard of it all as well. So it is really positive, and yeah, looking forward to another good weekend of it and plenty more clips from the likes of Fionn Higgins.
Absolutely, yeah. Credit to Dave Mervyn as well, who sends previews and wraps for the entire AIL and the women's AIL, because, as you say, Murray, again, because of the interest in the professional game, it sort of feels like we have to only squeeze this in almost in passing at times. Now, I know there are dedicated podcasts towards the AIL, like the club scene, which is brilliant, but I guess in fairness, most media publications, or at least say national publications, don't have the resources to be sending people to every AIL game around the country. So in a way, we are almost dependent on people like Dave, who produce that work and reports on a Saturday or Sunday. And even having those flood back into the inbox was a little bit enjoyable. Obviously, want to ask yourself, Birch, as well about, I don't know, just the sense of it being back. You're involved with Bective naturally, and that's an aspiration of yours, I suppose, to be more a part of that conversation as well down the line. But just to see club rugby back after such a long time out,
it's brilliant.
Must be satisfying.
And for players, for Alec Cadu's, for family members, just being back watching their friends and family play, and I think it's a breath of fresh air to be back. I know certainly our numbers are really good. We've a league game against the Tonians on Saturday, and just agree with you. Just seeing some of the little highlight clips going around social media. Some of the games are being streamed. Some of the games are Friday nights. It's just, if you get a chance to go out and just support your local club and watch a bit of domestic rugby, I think it's where it's all at. And I'm delighted to be still a part of it and back a part of it, really.
Just to touch upon that marquee fixture from the weekend, Murray, if you were Con, you'd be absolutely snapping, because you were unbeaten, coasting towards the title, but when the season was curtailed last time out, then you lose your opener to friendly rivals, Lansdowne in Dublin, and it's one of your own, albeit from a past life, in Paul Kiernan, who scores the winner. But listen, a blow struck by Lansdowne early doors against probably the favourites in Con in what was a tight game. I think a very even game, albeit I didn't see it myself.
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing. It's seeing where people pick up after such a long time away from it. I saw Highfield obviously got off to a winning start, and they were very frustrated when it all got called time on and they weren't able to get promoted. But there's been changes to squads, and it'll be fascinating to see how it pans out in terms of the strength. You look at someone like Terranure, they had a big win away to UCC, and they've recruited some really strong players who've just kind of come out of professional rugby. The likes of Jordan Coughlin, who can make a big impact instantly as well. I know UCC had John Hodnett back from injury, but which is another story, an exciting one nonetheless. But just a rejig of squads, and the long period might change the status quo. Listen, I'll be shocked if Con don't bounce back, and Lansdowne are always going to be really strong. But it was a nice juicy fixture to start, and there's going to be a real battle there for places, as well as the clubs who were threatened by relegation, having had a chance to kind of recover and rebuild a little bit. Ballinhinch were in that bracket in 1A. They had a defeat away to young Munster, who looked impressive based on the rugby I saw. Really balanced attacking performance, nice kicking, nice maul work as you would expect as well. So yeah, just brilliant rugby on show, and there's going to be plenty more high quality fixtures like Lansdowne Cork.
Certainly will be. Women's game as well. Bernard, I suppose it's a little bit of a different conversation in the sense that, as we have touched upon previously, you have sort of four clubs that seem to be out ahead of the rest of the pack, and you had very one-sided victories in, four of those games, was it? Including Railway Union winning, 142-0 against Wicklow. And let's stress, there's absolutely no criticism of a team winning by a high score. If we sort of complain about it, or if it seems a little bit uncomfortable, it's only because we want the league as a whole to be better, which just ties into past conversations about creating more talent in the women's game that eventually goes on to represent Ireland in green. But listen, at the same time though, Birch, Jesus, the women have been waiting just as long as the men, and to have it back at all is it's one step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it's a function of that result is a function of not having stronger competitions below that you have to qualify in, to get up to that level. But that's an issue for that, you'd imagine, or I'd like to hope that be part of this review process. And whoever is the Irish women's coach going forward, whether it's Adam Griggs or somebody else, that they get stuck into the domestic game and they work with the clubs to try and obviously make it more competitive. Look, you can't blame the top four or the top five. They're doing a great job. They're just kicking on. But I suppose from a strategy point of view, someone needs to be looking at this and saying, well, how can we make it more competitive? Is it coaching? Is it playing numbers? Or is it all of the above and other things? So that's not going to get fixed overnight. But it is good for them for the women's game to be back. The league. They're playing in week in, week out now, which is the same as the men's. That's why they lace up a pair of boots. So I'm sure that they're enjoying that as well, and they'll build into the season, and hopefully it's great competition.
just on Saturday on the 42, Gav, we'll have a piece around women's AL and domestic rugby on the women's side. And it's been really fascinating to speak to some of the coaches involved and also to Colleen McEntee in the RFU about it. And like, they're obviously well aware that those kind of results aren't positive. There's loads of different strands to how it can be better. Coaching the coaches, obviously players moving from smaller clubs into those big four, understandably, the role of the interpros, international players being away, that step from 18s up to senior rugby, there's a whole lot to it, and that is part of the review that they're doing. You just hope that a review leads to real action, because that was the thing I really came away from with, is like, everyone, now that the anger is kind of slightly subsiding after what happened around the World Cup and that failure, there's just an incredible amount of energy and positivity and desire to actually get more cohesion in that layer underneath the national team and upwards onto that national team. So it's going to be a couple of years and a work in progress, but fingers crossed that when we're talking about women's AIL in 2 or 3 years' time, that you're not going to see those big scorelines, or at least far fewer and far between.
Here's hoping. Well, if you are getting over to your club or one of the provinces over the weekend, enjoy it. Murray and Owen Toolan will be back on Monday for the 42 members. It's members.the42.ie if you want to sign up and get access to Rugby Weekly Extra with the two lads and so many other podcasts. The Football Family, I think, are recording simultaneous to ourselves ahead of Ireland's, I was going to say, pivotal qualifier away to Azerbaijan. Absolute dead rubber, and yet they feel seismic these days, don't they? We've got Gav Cooney's Behind the Line sports writing podcast, loads of stuff. If you go to members.the42.ie, you'll see the whole thing laid out in front of you, and you can make a call on it then. Birch, thank you.
Thank you, guys. See you next week.
And thank you, Murray.
Cheers, Gav. Appreciate it.
Catch you next week. Until then, mind yourselves. Take it easy.